So I've just spent the last couple of days, actually the last week, preparing for our first snowfall. And this is basically the result of these many days of work. And I would love to share with you what I've done. First, we went in the forest and we foraged the last of the black trumpet mushrooms, and that's what I have here in this jar. So I foraged them and then I dried them. And these are going to last a long time, and they are such a great addition for broth, soup, even pasta. Last month, I believe, or the month before, I foraged hawthorn berries and rose hips. And I tried to dry them without using my oven. I don't have a dehydrator. I tried to only air dry them, but unfortunately some of them started to look a little funny and I actually found some moldy ones, so I no longer felt comfortable using them for tea or food. But I actually decided, why don't I just use them to make garlands? I also dried some oranges, and I tried to dry some persimmons, but they kind of curled up, but I think they look a little bit like stars, so maybe that worked out. And then I used that to make a garland. After I came back from the forest, I decided to try to prep my garden for winter as much as possible, and there were some things I could still forage. This past summer we planted a raspberry bush, and while we had actually a couple of raspberries left right now, what I was interested in was gathering some raspberry leaves. So these are raspberry leaves from my raspberry bush, and this makes a great tea. So that was the first thing from the garden. And the last thing I had left in my garden was a lot of peppers, surprisingly. So here, I just pickled these, which is why there's condensation and it looks warm. But these are cayenne peppers, serrano peppers, and some garlic that I pickled. And usually you'd want to make sure that you're using a jar that is just big enough, but since I know we're gonna eat these very quickly, I'm not too concerned. And then finally, this is halfway between foraging and gardening, but my garden has a lot of stinging nettle, and that's not something I've planted, that's just something that grows here. But it is something that you can utilize in a lot of different ways. So this is stinging nettle that I blanched and then just froze into little cubes. And this is an amazing herb that is full of micronutrients, especially iron. So this is great just to quickly add into a soup or a stew or just anything that you make. You can just throw a cube in there and then you've got some extra nutrients. So I think that's fantastic. And then with the water left over from blanching them, I made this. This is going to be a hair rinse, and I've never tried this before, but I hear all the time about how great stinging nettle is for your hair. So I actually also added some rosemary, since I know rosemary should also help your hair. Basically just tea, a nettle rosemary tea, and I'm going to use it to hopefully help. I've been having some health issues lately that cause my hair to be very thin and fall out, so hopefully this helps. Oh, and finally, I actually from the garden I had some more herbs. I decided that I would like for the next year to focus more on growing herbs rather than vegetables because it's a little more feasible for me. But here I have yarrow, chamomile, and some random flowers. Just dried the same method I used to dry these, and I'm just going to use it as a tea whenever I feel like it. Actually, the last thing I have are some roasted chestnuts. I'm preparing these for a recipe that I'm working on that will be done soon. But that's everything I've been doing the last couple of days, and now if you'd like to see how I did all this, keep watching. Thank you, Luna. The first thing I'm going to do is head back into the woods and gather the last of the black trumpet mushrooms from my local forest. So there should be at least a little bit left. Alright, so our first stop is to head into the woods.
Black trumpet mushrooms are great for beginner foragers because they don't have poisonous lookalikes. So here are some ways that you can identify them. First of all, you're going to find them in hardwood forests, so among trees like beech, ash, and oak. Here in my forest, we have mostly beech trees with a few conifers mixed in. These mushrooms love shade and they love moisture, so forests where there's a thick canopy of leaves above and maybe a stream or something nearby and lots of moss. It's actually a similar environment to where you find chanterelles in the summer. But black trumpets come out in late autumn and early winter. They're going to be funnel or trumpet shaped and hollow inside with a velvety soft texture, and they do not have true gills, but they have kind of ripples and ridges on the outside. So once I'm home, I like to clean them off with a damp towel. You don't want to submerge them in water since we're going to be drying them, and it's just going to make them take way too long to dry. So what I do is I clean them off a little bit, and then I tear them into pieces, and then lay them down on a parchment paper covered baking sheet. And when you do this, you definitely want to be careful that you're removing all pieces of dirt and any critters that might be in there. Sometimes you'll find worms or slugs or spiders or all types of things, and we don't really want to be eating those. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and finish processing all of them. Once I was finished sorting them, it was already pretty late in the day, so instead of turning on my oven to start the drying process, I just turned on the oven light and I let them sit with the oven door open overnight so they had a chance to evaporate a little bit more. The next morning, I woke up and I turned my oven to 50 degrees Celsius, which is the lowest that it will go, and I let them sit in there for a couple hours. Now, I periodically checked on them to feel if they were dry. I flipped them over. I think one time I had to drain a little bit of liquid off of them, but this took all day. So it's a very low and slow process. And when they're done, they're going to be slightly pliable, but definitely completely dry. Just be sure to store them in an airtight container.
Thank you, Luna. All right, now that we have our mushrooms sorted, we're gonna go head into the garden and see what we can get done before dark, because it gets dark so early now.
Now the first thing I'm doing in the garden is heading to the very top of the hill to gather some stinging nettle. This is not something I've planted, this is something just indigenous to the area, and it is a wonderful herb. It has a lot of health benefits, and I actually quite like the taste, and I do like to make tea out of it as well. I basically just tried to fill up my basket, and then when I went inside, I just blanched it really quickly and put it into an ice cube tray to make little nettle ice cubes that I add to soup and stew, and it's amazing. It's so full of nutrients. While I was working, I started to notice that snow was dusting the mountaintops, so I knew I didn't have much time until the snow reached down here. I also picked some red clover that I saw and the last few raspberries from our raspberry bush. But I wasn't done with my raspberry bush just yet. I also wanted to pick some of the leaves for making raspberry leaf tea. This tea has great health benefits. It's used to help menstruation, and it's even used at the end of pregnancy. I was going to prune my bush back for winter anyway, so I'm just utilizing the part of the plant that I would have otherwise discarded, and I think that's great. I ended up pruning the bush much more off camera, and I just tried to fill my basket with the leaves as much as possible. And now we're gonna go check on our spicy peppers. I actually planted these peppers far later in the year than I had been wanting to, but that meant that I still had a great harvest at this point in the year. I grew cayenne peppers and serrano peppers. I used the serrano peppers in salsas, and then the cayenne peppers, I made both pickled peppers and my own homemade buffalo sauce. Amazing. So I guess you could say this was my harvest at this point. We have the stinging nettle. We actually have a basket full of herbs that I did not record myself picking. I have yarrow and chamomile. I have my peppers. I had a couple scraggly tomatoes that don't look so nice, but they were fine. We have the red clover, and then of course we have the dried mushrooms that we prepared the day before. Now to pickle my peppers, I just use a quick pickle marinade, which is equal parts vinegar and water with salt, and I don't like to use sugar in mine. And I pour that hot over the sliced peppers, and it is delicious. Now we have some crafting to do, and this is what we're using. I have orange slices and persimmon slices that I dried in the same manner as the mushrooms, which took over a day. But it was worth it because I think they look beautiful. The persimmons kind of crinkled up and they look a little bit like stars. Then I also have the dried rose hips and hawthorn berries that I mentioned in the beginning, and I also have some dried rosemary from the garden. Now what I'm doing is very simple. I have some string and a thick needle, and I'm just threading all the elements of my garland through. And this is a wonderful alternative to something that is made of plastic or something that's just going to break and end up in a landfill after one-time use. And I saved these for next year, so not only are they compostable, but I'm still using them for multiple years, and they look so pretty in my opinion. I had my daughter help and she had so much fun. This is definitely something that I will be continuing to do year after year. And wouldn't you know it, the morning after, we finally got that snow we were promised, so I'm really glad that we got to take care of all of these things before the freeze. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions about the crafts that I did.